Mark, welcome back to another episode. We're in studio today.
Dude, this is awesome.
Yeah, it's kind of nice having you in person, being able to do this live.
Now, I don't know why I didn't get the memo that, we're in the middle of summer. It's 120 degrees outside, and somehow I went jacket and long sleeve shirt. This is such a fail, epic fail. But yeah, no, this is fun. We were just shooting another podcast with one of our local advisors.
Yeah.
We built this office out with the thought of bringing advisors across the country in to do a podcast. So today, this is our podcast talking about the benefits of podcasting and in our own podcast room. So this is kind of cool. I love it.
Doing the Prospect, Produce, Prosper podcast. Enough P's in there.
Who wrote that up? We need to get a hold of our writer.
Seriously, who's your marketing director?
Who's your marketing director? You are. You're our marketing director. Holy cow! No, this has been fun. We're cruising through summertime,
Almost over.
and yeah, it's like kids are full sports and getting ready to go back to school, and parents are ready for their kids to go back to school and get them out. And you know what? We're on some interesting times. We're headed into this Harris, versus Trump election. Interest rates are still up more than they have been. Everybody thought that we'd at least see now some interest rate cutbacks. Financial advisors, I think, are starving for ways to get in front of new investors to continue to educate them. And this is why I really felt like, as we're on these uncertain times, finding ways to continue to become a thought leader as an advisor. And what's interesting, James, and I think I've done something like 30,000 interviews of financial advisors over my 22 years as a wholesaler or as an owner of an IMO. And the conversations are amazing. When I sit down with advisors and the wealth of knowledge that's out there. And then it's like, James, it's like I'm sitting there talking sometimes to these 30-year, 40-year veterans that are just unloading this knowledge. And then they've got no YouTube page. They've got no article that they have written or a book that they've written. They have no website that really tells their story. And it's kind of sad, right? It's actually kind of sad and frustrating. Because, gosh, have I had some of the knowledge that's out there that these advisors that I meet with, it's like if I could just take that and throw it in and start marketing with it and help develop it, what a special thing that could be, right? And you talk to some of these advisors of these experiences that they have and how they've helped people navigate these type of uncertain times throughout years and helping people retire, and how passionate they are about helping people retire, yet they have no medium to do that. And this is why, if you're an advisor, hopefully you're listening to our podcast today, talking about why you should start a podcast. I think if you want to be a thought leader, if you want to grow your business today and almost do it organically, right? If you want to have an organic growth, podcasting is such a powerful tool because you get the audio, you get the visual, right? And ultimately you have an asset that you can find totally different ways to utilize to help educate, people.
Yeah.
But it seems like it's daunting, right, James? Like, I think most advisors, one of the perceived challenges, it's like, where do you start? So what would you say to an advisor that's like, gosh, James, like where do you even start about a podcast?
I think that's an interesting question. I think the problem that advisors are facing and leading to the point of why they should be doing podcasting is, yes, they have a lot of wealth of knowledge to give, but it's becoming more and more noisy out there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, think of how many more financial advisors there are today than there were 20 years ago.
Sure.
Think of how much news and how much information is just at everybody's disposal at any given time. And in terms of marketing your business, you have to be able to have a way to stand out. And podcasts are a really powerful method of doing that for a number of different reasons. I'm sure we'll talk about some of them today. But I think that probably the biggest sticking point for advisors in terms of starting a podcast is they just don't know. They don't know how to do it. They don't know where to start. And the reality is you actually don't need to have all that you think you need to have. I mean, think of when you were first in this industry. You've now been in this industry for 20 plus years. What did you have when you first started?
Oh, I mean, a hope and a dream.
A hope and a dream. In reality, right? Like,
Yeah.
you probably went out there and you started just talking with people.
Yep.
It wasn't perfect conversations, but you started. And in the process of doing that, you've now built up this business of, you've been in this business for 20 years. You now have Producers Prospect for a number of years. And every year you're continuing to grow as you continue to help more advisors. That didn't just happen out of the blue.
Yeah, right.
It's because of the constant repetitive processes that you've put in place and practice that you've had over years. Podcasting is the same way. I think a lot of times we feel like it needs to be perfect.
Yeah.
I mean, this podcast hasn't been perfect, but that doesn't mean it's not impactful.
Right.
Right? I mean, in reality, when you have a regular conversation with somebody, are there flubs here and there, or are there things that you mess up? Absolutely. That means you're human.
Right.
And in a podcast, that's almost the effect you want to give anyways, is that you're real, right? It's not this perfected video. It's not this Hollywood-esque scripted video. It's real thought. And you're right. Some of these advisors have all this wealth of knowledge. In fact, I was thinking about this today as we were driving in. I thought, we're in this election cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And regardless of whatever side of the fence you're on in terms of Trump or Harris, the ideas are that we're trying to elect the person that we feel will, in our minds, retain the American dream. Who will do that best?
Yep.
Who will advance the future of this country? And when I think of financial advisors, I think that financial advising is, we have politicians, we have 40 years that we're working to build the dream, the American dream. Advisors are there to ensure its legacy. And I think that that's such a power. I don't know of a more impactful industry to be in than as a financial advisor. And so when you have that at your disposal and you have the impact that you can have at your disposal to be able to get out in front of people and just provide information, it doesn't always have to be totally specific on a topic. It can be just talking here and there. But you have something to say, and there are people that want to listen. And there's really not a better platform to do that than a podcast. And so I seriously think that advisors need to be considering this from the standpoint of it's one of the best ways to build thought leadership. And so here's a couple stats that I found as I was preparing for this podcast.
Okay.
That I thought were super, super interesting,
Yep.
relevant for financial advisors.
I like stats too.
So 40% of the U.S. population listens to podcasts monthly.
Wow.
That's a huge stat.
That's massive.
40% of the population are listening monthly to podcasts. 54% of listeners are buying products advertised on podcasts.
Wow.
That's crazy, right?
That's crazy.
So whether that's, there are some podcasts that have actual advertising on there. There's other podcasts where they're just talking about their business. And I thought about that. I was like, that's kind of a crazy stat to think about it. Half of the people that listen to podcasts are buying products that were advertised on that podcast. How is that even possible? And I thought, well, what kind of person listens to a podcast and why do they listen to a podcast? They listen to a podcast because they think that the person they're listening to has some authority, has some clout, has some reputation, and they're wanting to follow them. So naturally, because they're listening and tuning into what that person has to say, when that person says, go get this, or you need this to better your life, a lot of people are going to do that. They're going to follow that. And so you have a tremendous opportunity to promote your business, and the people that constantly listen are already thinking, hey, this guy's got something to say. Okay, here's another stat that I thought was just crazy and super relevant to the financial advisor. Podcast listeners tend to be affluent and educated, with many having a household income over $250,000.
Interesting.
When you think about who your ideal clients are, that's that. That's that person right there.
Well, that's so, because as you were talking about, when I sit down with an advisor and we kind of start to talk about where do you start and how do you get started podcasting, I like to start with the end result, which is who is your ideal client, your ideal customer. What does that person look like? And sometimes, James, I actually sit and map out, because when you ask an advisor who's their a client, sometimes you get these blank stares. So it's like, all right, well, let's start there. But most advisors, their book of business is that old 80-20 rule. 80% of their income come from 20% of their book of business. And that 20% is normally your A clients.
Yep.
Those are the people that you actually want to really help. You know how to help them. So start with, if I was going to say you're thinking about starting a podcast, start with the end result. How do I get more A clients? Who is that A client? And then what's important to them? And
Yes.
speak to that. Speak directly to them. So the fact that you have a stat there that actually says more affluent people, typically if you're trying to grow your business or even scale up your business, right? You're trying to get better people in your book of business. You know, like you said, this is a great medium. I think that one of the things too that I love is every time we bring an advisor in, they sit down, they start to do this, right? They're in the oversized chair. We're having a conversation, because that's what really it is. If it feels like you're just sitting around, kind of just talking, it's fun. Like it really is fun. You can be candid. You know, you can feel comfortable, right? You don't have to be perfect, like you were saying. But the other kind of perceived challenge is most people don't know how to stay compliant or work within their compliance department. So one of the things that we do when you're doing your podcast with us is we really help you with making sure that you're staying on track, that you're saying the things that you should or shouldn't be saying. We'll work with your compliance department. And if we need to cut up or re-edit or things like that, we have the ability to kind of help you do that. We understand financial services, so work with a podcasting group that understands your trade, really help you navigate that compliance standpoint. Time. Advisors don't know really when to post, how to post it. They think it's going to distract or take a ton of time away from them actually sitting in front of clients. So I think one of the things that we do, again, differently is you fly into Scottsdale, you spend a day or two with us, we get you on the light board in your studio, or we take you to the green screen, and then we also spend time in the podcast. You can really, from a time standpoint, you can put together 3 or 4 shows in an afternoon and then have that content ready to be pushed out. And then most importantly is that we have an efficient way to push it out, which is you, James, help a lot of our advisors with this way to take a podcast and get so much use out of it.
Yeah.
So how does an advisor get use out of a podcast?
Well, I think that we have to, like you mentioned earlier, start with the end in mind. You talked about it in terms of your target audience, which is super critical. They have to do that. From a production standpoint, when we think about end in mind, we think, okay, how can we repurpose this content as much as possible? Because the advisors don't have the time to sit there and create videos and then emails and then social clips and then this and that and the other. And so if we can do it, we can sit them down in an afternoon and crank out 3 to 4 episodes at a time, then we have the ability, if we start with video like we're doing right here, we have the ability to not only have a long form video for YouTube, we now take the audio and we have it for podcast platforms. We have the transcription of it so we can write the emails that will be dripped out to the audience. We have the long form videos that we then can take the social short clips from and segment those out. We have an advisor that started doing this a couple months ago, and already he's up to 400 or 500 views a video with 0 audience. Just people tuning in.
Wow.
That YouTube is pushing for us. We're not spending a dime on advertising yet. We're just putting it out there, and he's getting free advertising to 500 people per video. And it's just continuing to grow the more and more that we're doing this, because the platforms reward you when you have more content. They want people on their platforms. So they will almost, it's probably not a real good explanation of it, but if you were to think of like SEO, you have content that's there, and the more content that you have, the platforms reward you and you're ranked a little bit higher. It's kind of like that, although different, but kind of like that. The more consistent you are with content, the more the platforms will reward you because you're keeping people on their platform. And so the idea that we can take one video and create all of these different assets, and I think that's an important distinction to make, is it is an asset in your business. Think about Facebook ads or seminars even. COVID hit, seminars stopped. What were you left with?
Webinars, digital.
Yeah, you could do
and
some of those
most didn't
things.
have it,
Most don't know how to do a webinar, but your seminar business is shot dead during COVID. You had nothing. And same with Facebook ads. You run Facebook ads, well, what if the algorithm changes and then all of a sudden prices jack up, which has happened like 15 times in the last 5 years.
And
maybe
will continue to happen.
Will always continue to happen. So you stop ads, and what are you left with? Nothing. There's nothing to show for it because the ad is stopped. Whereas when you do an organic approach, it does take a little bit longer. It's not going to generate leads today if you post it today. but it will certainly serve you as an asset that will continue to drive in people over time and as you're consistent with it. And so for all of those reasons, for the ability to stand out in a crowded market, for the ability to build an asset, for the ability to build multiple assets, to be almost omnipresent in your marketing and be seen on multiple different platforms and channels from a single piece of content, it's pretty powerful. Unlike any other thing that you can do, it's pretty powerful.
So, so one of the things that I also, going along that same line, one of the things that I love about podcasting is it's really kind of cost effective. Amongst doing a dinner seminar or educational event or buying leads. And so advisors, are always looking, because they're normally very efficient with their money, to say, how do I, have a marketing initiative and not spend, a ton of money doing it. And you really don't have to spend a ton of money. You got to get great equipment. And that's something that we can help you, right? If you want to build your podcast kind of studio at your office, and we encourage that, right? You don't have to come use ours. We'll set you up with your own equipment. But I got a big question to ask, because, and I'm kind of putting you on the spot. This isn't even something we rehearsed prior to this, but there's this movement out there of different organizations really pushing radio. And so one, James, is radio dead? And two, radio versus podcasting, what's best?
I don't think radio's dead per se.
Okay.
I don't know that any one channel or platform is dead. But when you just look at the direction of content in general, what does think of Disney, think of Amazon, think of Netflix, think of Hulu, which is Disney, think of ABC, think of Primetime. Like, what are they all trying to do?
Yep.
They're trying to create their own content.
Correct.
Because they understand the value of being your own medium, your own source. In today's day and age, anybody can start a radio show, right? And when you look at the numbers alone, here's one last stat.
Okay.
The podcast industry is projected to grow significantly, reaching a market size of $30.03 billion in 2024. What does that tell you? Marketing is about behavior, right? Understanding consumers' behavior, because the consumer behavior trends changes our marketing approach. So I would say, okay, if I'm going to spend $5,000 on radio, what will that get me? What happens if I stop paying for it? Who is actually going to listen at that moment, at that specific channel that my ad is placed?
Yep.
Is it going to stay there? And the reality is you just have a limited reach. It's not that it doesn't work. Obviously, there's a reason why people still do it. But if you have a limited marketing budget and you're not trying to make this massive, expensive branding play, which when you grow to a certain size, you should be thinking about that. Podcasting gives you the ability to create your own show, your own station that is yours. It's your asset that nobody can take from you. Nobody can replicate. You own it. And when people follow that, you are completely independent of all these other mediums, right? In marketing, we talk about 3 different types of traffic that you can generate for your business. The first is controlled traffic, which is kind of what we're talking about in the sense of ads and mailers and radio.
Yep.
You are paying for these platforms to send you traffic.
Right.
But the minute you stop paying is the minute that source stops.
Yep.
So you're completely dependent on them to source you traffic, and thus you have to keep paying for it. The second form of traffic is earned traffic, and this is things like referrals. This could be things like SEO. You don't know when it's going to happen, but because of the reputation that you've built with some of your clients, referrals, whatever, they refer you business. You want that, but you don't control it. It just comes at random. The third form of traffic, which is really the most important, is owned traffic. This is traffic that you own because your brand is there. So this is your contact lists, email, phone number, address, name, whatever. And you acquire that, and now you can market to that list irregardless of any other platform. You're not dependent on any other platform, which is why also we push drip marketing, right?
Yep.
It's so important because you own it. It costs 1/1000th of a penny to send an email. But to send Facebook ads to generate an actual lead costs hundreds, if not thousands of dollars.
Right.
So the goal is to generate all that stuff to where you own it. Well, when you have your own podcast and people are following you and they're subscribed to you, nobody can take that away. You own that.
Yeah.
And that's the power of it, is it becomes a real asset. It truly is a real valuable asset. In fact, some people sell their shows to businesses because of the traffic that's generated from it.
Sure.
And so that's the whole goal of marketing, is to
Yep.
create yourself this source of traffic that is independent of any particularly paid. I mean, you certainly can pay to have more traffic, but you want to get to a point where you own it all.
Well, and other things, right? I think podcasting makes your marketing efficient. I think it's just a piece of that brand experience that you give to people.
Yeah.
And I think that gone are the days that you do a dinner seminar and then you don't have the other things to back up. It's mind blowing to me, James, that an advisor would spend $10,000, $11,000, do the highest steakhouse in their area and bring people in, and that people are walking through their doors that don't know who they are. They're shaking hands, meeting them for the first time. Then they are solely relying on that hour-long presentation to hope to get a meeting. And then X amount of those people end up coming to meeting. And then, of course, you start the sales process and you kind of end up forgetting about all those people that came that didn't buy from you, that you spent all that money on, and you just kind of write the handful. And of course, the ROI is there. And dinner seminars work, right? So I'm not saying that they don't work, but podcasting is another way to give you better ROI on your other marketing, whether you're buying leads, whether you're doing dinner seminars or educational events, or you're just wanting to get more referrals. Podcasting is sort of a cornerstone to making sure that all these other things really work out well. So you can use your podcast as part of your pregame. You got a dinner seminar on, in 2 weeks, and somebody signs up. You can immediately send them your podcast, introducing yourself.
Yep.
So you can start building that credibility, that thought leadership, and having people get to know you, right? And then utilize the podcast after the event as your post-game process, sending out clips, sending full-length video, sending, the maybe the hosts or the guests that you have on. So if you're going to have a guest speaker at your dinner seminar, that person better be your guest host on your podcast, right? While you're doing it. And then you send that video out. It creates consistency. It creates that credibility and that thought leadership. And then, like you were saying, I don't know of another marketing tool that the day you put out a new podcast and you blast it out onto Apple, that instantly shows up to all of your people that are following your podcast, boom, right onto their notifications, right onto their front screen. Hey, my advisor just put out a new podcast. I better go listen to it. I know that's as soon as the different podcasts I'm listening to, when the new one shows up on my phone, it registers with me and reminds me that tomorrow morning when I'm on the treadmill at the gym that I need to listen to that new show, right? And so what a powerful way. The reality is radio versus podcasting versus dinner seminars and other things. I think it all comes back to how many new clients you're trying to get in front of, what other funnels, what other ways are you generating revenue and income. Podcasting is a no-brainer. You should be doing podcasting. Even if you have a radio show, you should be doing podcasting at the same time.
Can I interject at
Go
this
ahead.
point?
Yep.
So one of my favorite channels is this sports channel in Utah.
Yep.
Where they talk about all things Utah sports. And there's a show on there around the noon hour with Hans and Scotty. You're probably familiar with it being up in Utah.
Uh-huh.
Love listening to them. I'm not in Utah, so I don't get to listen to them live.
Yep.
But you know what they do as a radio show? They put all their shows on podcast.
Super smart. Well, this has been fun. I'm excited to help advisors grow their business. Like, that is at heart, what I truly get excited about every morning is to bring new ideas to the advisors that I work with, or the ones that I get to meet and help support. Delegate it to us, right? Delegate this part of your business and let us truly help you. If you're not part of the Producers Prospect family of advisors that we work with, reach out to us at producersprospect.com. You can also connect with us on all the major social media platforms. We're on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn and TikTok. So if you punch in Producers Prospect, really on any of those social media platforms, YouTube, you can get to us. right on my website, you can schedule a time to talk to me, and we can set up, a one-on-one time where we can really help you navigate and lay out a plan to help you achieve your goals and take your business to the next level. So, James, thank you so much for putting this together, and we're looking forward to helping many more get going in their podcasting dreams.
Yeah.